Captain Olivia Hall stood at the front of the massive council chamber, her posture straight, her eyes focused. Around her, the representatives of the Galactic Council watched with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. It was the first time that humans had been called to speak before such a powerful assembly, and Hall knew the weight of the moment. She glanced briefly at Eric Jensen, her lead scientist, who was standing at the back of the room, his arms crossed. He was nervous, though he tried to hide it behind a calm demeanor. Humans had never before interacted with so many species at once, let alone been asked to represent themselves in such an important forum. The chamber, a grand, multi-tiered arena with floating platforms and luminous walls, was filled with delegates from every corner of the galaxy. There were the towering beetle-like Lothar, whose exoskeletons shimmered with an iridescent hue, the sleek, telepathic Tren, their bodies flowing like liquid, moving with an unnatural grace, and the ferocious Muzthar, whose reptilian faces showed only disdain for everything they deemed weak. Captain Hall could feel their eyes on her, sizing her up, as if daring her to prove humanity's worth. She was painfully aware of the fact that most of these species considered humans to be a curiosity at best, a potential threat at worst. The large screen above her flickered to life, displaying an image of Earth, a lush green planet swarming with life. Hall spoke, her voice steady, but carrying the weight of an entire species' future. "Earth is a world where survival is a battle," she began. "We've learned to adapt, to fight, to grow in the face of constant challenges. We don't rely on physical strength or advanced weaponry. We rely on something more fundamental, our ability to learn and to change." The Lothar delegate, a hulking figure with 3 glowing eyes, leaned forward. "You claim to survive by learning. That's laughable. We endure by overcoming, by conquering the deadliest of worlds." Hall nodded, unfazed. "And that's exactly why we're here, to show you that there's another way." Jensen stepped forward, his voice calm but precise. "Humans don't just survive, we innovate. We adapt to the impossible. We've done it on Earth. And now, we're ready to do it in the galaxy." The chamber fell silent. This sets the stage for the impending trials, planting the seed of doubt in the Council's minds, while asserting humanity's determination and ingenuity. It also hints at the deeper tensions between the humans' approach to survival and the more traditional brute force methods favoured by other species. The Council chamber had quieted after Captain Hall's words, but the skepticism lingered in the air like a thick fog. The delegates, still unsure about the humans' claim of survival through innovation and adaptability, murmured among themselves. On Earth, survival was a matter of learning how to deal with an environment that was, quite frankly, out to kill you. Every day, humans faced challenges that would break other species: tsunamis, earthquakes, plagues, and predators that ranged from microscopic to colossal. Yet, over time, humanity had turned these dangers into opportunities. Eric Jensen stood beside Hall, now addressing the Council, his voice calm yet commanding. "You all come from worlds where strength and brutality are the primary tools for survival. On Earth, we've learned that brute force can't solve everything. Our survival is rooted in our ability to adapt, to change our environment as much as we change ourselves. We innovate because we have to." One of the Tren delegates, a lithe figure who seemed almost translucent, tilted their head slightly. Their voice, when they spoke, was a soft hum that vibrated in the air. "What you describe sounds like weakness. You can't endure by merely adjusting to your circumstances. To truly survive, one must dominate." Jensen's lips twitched. "And yet, for all your domination, you still struggle with environmental collapse. On your world, You bend nature to your will, but your methods are unsustainable. We don't just bend to nature, we understand it. We find solutions that allow us to coexist. Hall stepped in, seeing that the conversation was heading in a dangerous direction. We've evolved to coexist with the Earth, not to conquer it. And that's why we're here, to offer that same mindset to the galaxy. Our species is resilient, yes, but we thrive because we don't just survive, we learn. We learn how to fix the things that threaten us. She nodded to Jensen, who activated the central holo display. Images flashed onto the massive screen, showing historical footage of Earth's most dangerous moments. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius, the Black Death, wars that had nearly wiped out entire civilizations. These aren't just moments of survival, Jensen continued. They're moments of transformation. We learned from these crises. We adapted, and then we moved forward stronger. The Council looked at the images, and for the first time, a flicker of recognition passed between them. The humans weren't just a threat. They were something different. This continuation digs deeper into humanity's approach to survival, using Earth's history as a backdrop to highlight the human capacity to innovate and adapt. It also introduces a subtle shift in the Council's perception. What initially seemed like arrogance now seems more like the promise of potential. The tension remains, but the humans are beginning to spark curiosity instead of disdain. The first trial was set. The Griven world, a desolate wasteland of scorched earth and volatile radiation, was the perfect stage for the humans to prove their worth, or to fail spectacularly. The planet had killed countless explorers over the centuries. Its brutal storms could melt metal, its radioactive zones stripped life away within hours. The Grivens had been chosen to test humanity's mettle, and they believed there was no way these soft humans would survive. As the human delegation descended through the thick, swirling clouds of Griven's atmosphere, the heavy gravity tugged at their bodies, making every movement feel like they were pushing against the weight of the world. The drop pod shuddered violently as they hit the surface, but Captain Olivia Hall's voice remained steady over the comms. "Hold it together. Everyone out. We don't have time for hesitation." Eric Jensen, his face a mixture of excitement and anxiety, was the first to emerge, his visor instantly fogging up as he stepped into the acidic air. He quickly activated the atmospheric filter, a device the humans had designed to withstand Griven's toxic atmosphere. It didn't provide perfect protection, but it allowed them to breathe enough to function. Hall followed, scanning the barren landscape. A wasteland of cracked earth stretched in every direction. The horizon was choked with dark clouds, the radiation levels far above any safe threshold. It wasn't just a death world. It was a place that seemed determined to swallow them whole. But the humans didn't panic. Instead, they started moving, pulling out devices from their packs, working with a calm efficiency that belied the threat surrounding them. Jensen began analyzing the soil, setting up makeshift radiation sensors. "There's a mineral here," he muttered, scanning his handheld device. "It could neutralize some of the radiation." Hall nodded. "Good. Set up a perimeter and get the shelter running. We need to make this place livable, even for a few hours." As the team worked, they built a temporary shelter using scavenged materials from their pod and the environment. They erected shields made from layers of Griven's mineral deposits, using their knowledge of geology to craft structures that could withstand the extreme radiation storms. Soon, they had a base camp, far from ideal, but more than any other species could have achieved on this hellish planet. The Grivens watched from a distance, their massive, clawed hands twitching in disbelief. The humans weren't flailing in desperation. They weren't collapsing under the planet's fury. They were surviving. And not just surviving, they were adapting, turning the very environment against itself. This continuation ramps up the intensity of the trial, focusing on the human team's ability to adapt and use their intelligence to survive, rather than relying on brute force. It also plants the seeds of the Griven's doubt, showcasing humanity's potential in the most dangerous of conditions. The humans are starting to change the perception of the galaxy's most powerful species. The next trial took the humans to Worm Noor, a world wrapped in perpetual twilight. The surface was covered by vast deserts of fine black sand, and beneath the ground, massive, burrowing predators known as the worms ruled with terrifying efficiency. The worms were not just deadly, they were intelligent, able to sense vibrations from miles away and detect even the slightest signs of fear. On Worm Noor, it wasn't strength that ensured survival, it was the ability to stay undetected. As the human team descended, their shuttle was swallowed by the vast expanse of the desert below. The thin atmosphere and poisonous air made even the smallest misstep a potential death sentence. The mission was simple: navigate through the Worm Noor desert to reach a designated extraction point, all while avoiding the worms, who would hunt any living creature in their path. Captain Hall surveyed the landscape as she disembarked, her voice grim. "Stay low. No sudden movements. The worms can hear us, and if they catch our scent, it's over." Eric Jensen checked his sensors. "I've calibrated these to mask our thermal signatures, but it won't last long. We'll need to keep moving and be unpredictable." The ground beneath their feet was treacherous, shifting, unstable, and treacherous to anyone not familiar with its pulse. Every footstep felt like a countdown, as though the sand was alive, ready to swallow them whole. And Hall couldn't help but feel the unsettling weight of something lurking beneath the surface. The worms were always there watching. Their first encounter came much sooner than expected. A sharp tremor shook the ground. A deep rumble, followed by a sudden crack in the sand, sent the humans scrambling. Hall signaled her team to scatter, her heart pounding in her chest. A massive worm, its enormous, segmented body twisting and turning beneath the sand, had been disturbed. It was coming. Jensen whispered through the comms, "It's too fast. We can't outrun it." But Hall didn't panic. She remembered what had worked on Griven. Adaptation. Head for the rocks. Split up. Keep low. Don't give it a straight path to track. The humans scattered, using their agility and knowledge of the terrain to confuse the worm. Jensen threw a small device to the ground, creating a burst of vibrations that led the creature away from their path. Meanwhile, Hall and the others moved silently, leaving false trails and making their way through a narrow ravine where the sand shifted in unpredictable patterns. By the time the worm reared its head, they were gone, hidden in plain sight, its senses overwhelmed by the chaos of their movements. The Grivens, watching from a distance, were speechless. The humans hadn't fought or even tried to kill the creature. They had simply outsmarted it. This continuation emphasizes the high stakes of the trial, building on the sense of danger and urgency while showcasing the humans' resourcefulness. Their ability to adapt and outwit the deadly worms demonstrates that brute strength isn't the only way to survive a death world. The humans' strategic thinking starts to shift the perception of their true capabilities in the eyes of the Council and the audience. The trials on Worm Noor had been a resounding success for humanity. The Grivens, who had watched the humans outwit and avoid the worms, were no longer mocking their claims. There was something undeniably impressive about their approach to survival. But it wasn't just about survival anymore. Captain Hall knew that the humans needed to prove they were more than just clever. They needed to show that their greatest strength lay in what they could offer the galaxy, not just what they could endure. In a quiet moment, after the trial was over, Hall and Jensen gathered with the Council's leaders on the high observation deck of the Griven city, the sun sinking below the jagged horizon. The delegation had been allowed some time to rest, but now it was time to take the next step: humanity's pitch for the future. The Council members, still silent and watching, were waiting for the humans to speak. There was no question in Hall's mind that the previous trials had made an impact, but it was the next phase, the presentation of their true worth, that would change everything. They had to show that their approach to life could benefit not just their species, but the entire galaxy. Humanity's strength, Hall began, her voice steady, is in our adaptability. But more importantly, it's in our drive to help others adapt, too. Eric Jensen nodded and stepped forward, pulling up a series of holographic projections. Our history is one of trial and error, of setbacks and breakthroughs. We've faced near extinction, environmental collapse, wars that have torn our world apart. But we learned, adapted, and rebuilt. And we didn't just rebuild for ourselves. We rebuilt for the future. The screen flashed with images of Earth's most significant technological advancements, sustainable energy systems, agricultural innovations that had eradicated hunger, and groundbreaking medical breakthroughs that had extended human life and cured diseases that once ravaged entire populations. Then the images shifted to space technology, human-made terraforming equipment, interplanetary travel, and clean fusion power plants that had the potential to change entire ecosystems across the galaxy. We've learned how to reshape our planet for the better, Jensen continued. And we've developed technologies that could help you do the same. On Earth, we have worked tirelessly to reduce our own impact on the environment. We have learned how to heal damage done, not just to us, but to our world. Our knowledge could be applied to help other species thrive, to stabilize planets on the brink of ecological collapse, to prevent the kinds of disasters that could wipe out civilizations. The Council was quiet as the humans presented their case. For the first time, many of them realized the gravity of what was being offered. The humans were not just offering technology, they were offering collaboration, a chance to heal, to adapt, to grow together. The silence was broken when Foreign, the towering Griven warrior who had been skeptical from the start, spoke. His voice rumbled in the chamber, heavy with contemplation. Your species is more than I imagined. This continuation digs into the core of humanity's potential as a force for good in the galaxy, shifting from the physical trials to the philosophical. Humanity's real strength lies not just in surviving, but in the ability to adapt, to learn, and to help others evolve alongside them. It also marks a shift in the perception of the Council as the humans' true value begins to dawn on them, moving beyond mere survival to the possibility of partnership and progress. As the days passed on Griven, the atmosphere in the Council chamber began to change. What had once been a tense, cautious assembly was now filled with quiet murmurs, and for the first time, genuine curiosity. The Grivens, long known for their pride in their survival prowess, had reluctantly acknowledged the humans' resourcefulness. Other species, who had watched from the sidelines, now began to ask themselves, could humanity truly offer something different? Captain Hall stood before the Council once more, her face calm, but her mind racing. The trial was over, but the real challenge was just beginning. The question was no longer whether humans could survive on Deathworlds, but whether they could lead the galaxy into a new era of cooperation, if they could transform the way the Council approached its future. Her words echoed in the chamber, not as a command, but as an invitation. We're not here to take anything from you. We're here to offer a different path, one built on shared survival and collective growth. The Lothar delegate, A hulking figure whose mind seemed to work at the pace of their strong, calculating instincts leaned forward. "And what do you expect in return, human? There is always a price. You speak of collaboration, but there is always a cost to such partnerships." Hall's gaze didn't waver. "The price is simple. Trust. Humanity has learned that the key to survival isn't in holding everything for ourselves. It's in sharing. If we are to thrive together, we must start by sharing what we know. Our technologies, our methods, but more importantly, our willingness to help you overcome your own challenges." Eric Jensen, who had remained silent during Hall's speech, finally stepped up. He could sense the hesitation in the room, and he knew it was time to give the Council something concrete. "We've developed systems to terraform barren worlds. We've built methods to stabilize dying ecosystems, and we've learned how to reverse the damage we've caused to our own planet. Imagine if that knowledge could be shared. What could we achieve together, as a collective, if every species worked towards solving the most pressing problems of the galaxy?" A low murmur rippled through the Council. It was a vision that few had considered, one where power and domination were replaced by collaboration and mutual growth. Then, unexpectedly foreign, the Griven warrior who had doubted humanity's potential from the start stood. His voice, deep and gravelly, echoed in the chamber. "You have done what no one thought possible. You have shown us that there is more to survival than strength. Perhaps it's time we try something different." The Council grew silent as the first seeds of a new understanding took root. Humanity wasn't just surviving on Deathworlds, they were offering the galaxy a future beyond conflict. This continuation marks the pivotal moment when the Council begins to seriously consider humanity's vision for the future. It shows the shift from skepticism to cautious acceptance, with the humans presenting themselves not as conquerors, but as potential partners offering valuable knowledge and innovation. Foreign's change in attitude signals a broader potential for humanity to alter the course of galactic diplomacy. The moment of quiet introspection in the Council chamber lasted only for a heartbeat. The seeds of doubt had been planted, but they had not yet taken root in every mind. While some delegates, like Foreign, were beginning to see the value in humanity's offer, others were still suspicious, unwilling to consider that a species so young and untested could truly change the course of galactic history. The tension in the room thickened as the debate continued. The Lothar delegate, Korvok, was one of the most vocal critics. His eyes glowed with an unsettling intensity as he slammed his massive fist on the table, rattling the chamber. "You speak of trust, human, but what have we seen? A species that barely knows how to control its own planet, a species that has only recently left its cradle world. Yet you claim to possess the knowledge and wisdom to reshape the galaxy." Hall stood firm, undeterred by the outburst. "We've survived our darkest moments, Korvok. We've learned from our mistakes, and we're still learning. And we're willing to share that knowledge with you. You don't have to accept it, but we're offering a chance, an opportunity for something greater than endless war and conquest." But Korvok wasn't finished. "The Lothar are warriors, Captain. We fight to survive, not to negotiate with those who would weaken us. I do not need your fragile diplomacy." Across the room, the Tren delegate, a shimmering figure named Kailan, floated silently, their tendrils twitching in a barely perceptible motion. After a long pause, they spoke, their voice low but sharp. "Korvok speaks with the arrogance of someone who believes survival depends on strength alone. But we know better. We have watched the Lothar fight and struggle in their endless wars. How many of you have faced environmental collapse on your worlds? We have seen it again and again. The most powerful civilizations, brought low by their own ignorance of the forces they cannot control." There was a moment of uneasy silence. Kalan's words had struck a nerve, particularly with the Mithar delegate, who had remained mostly silent until now. The Mithar were a race built on violence and survival through strength, their history steeped in conquest. Their representative, a hulking creature named Sethor, leaned forward, his reptilian eyes narrowing. "And yet we have thrived. We have crushed weaker species and made this galaxy our own. You say we need asterisk cooperation asterisk. I say we need asterisk dominance asterisk." Hall's heart tightened. It was becoming clear that some species, no matter what evidence she presented, would never accept cooperation over domination. And yet, she refused to back down. Strength has its place, Sethor. But so does wisdom. And it is wisdom that has allowed humanity to thrive despite all odds. The chamber fell into a deep silence once more. The divide between those who believed in humanity's vision of a shared future and those who still adhered to old ways of thinking had been drawn. The debate had only just begun, and the galaxy's future would depend on who could bridge the gap. This continuation deepens the ideological conflict within the Council. While some species are beginning to accept humanity's vision of cooperation and innovation, others, especially the more militaristic factions like the Lothar and Insthar, remain entrenched in their beliefs that power and dominance are the only ways to thrive. This sets the stage for the pivotal moment where humanity must prove that their vision can indeed overcome these ancient ways of thinking, or face rejection from the rest of the galaxy. The Council chamber was a battleground of ideas, and it seemed as if the divide between the delegates had never been wider. The debate had spiraled into a tense stalemate, the voices of those who favoured human cooperation clashing with the relentless resistance of the old guard. The Mithar, the Lothar, and even some of the more isolationist species refused to consider that humanity, so young, so untested, could offer anything but weakness. Captain Hall could feel the weight of the moment pressing on her. This was the final test. The Council would decide whether humanity would remain on the fringes of galactic politics or be allowed to take its place as a force for change. It was a battle for the future, one that would determine whether they would build a new path together or continue the cycle of division and conflict that had marked galactic history for millennia. But Hall knew one thing for certain: humanity had already proven its worth. Now it was time to make the galaxy see it. Thorin, the Griven warrior who had once doubted humanity's potential, stood up. His massive form towered over the others, his voice carrying an authority that silenced the room. "I have seen their strength," he said, his deep voice echoing. "It is not the strength of claws or weapons, but the strength of will, the strength to adapt, to survive, to build something better. The humans have shown us something none of us have been able to do. They have learned from their mistakes, and they are offering that knowledge to us." The room was still, every eye now fixed on Thorin. His words were a turning point, and it was clear that even some of the most hardened delegates were beginning to reconsider their positions. Korvok, the Lothar representative, grunted in frustration but did not speak. Kalan, the Tren delegate, seemed to be deep in thought, their translucent form flickering as if caught in the weight of their decision. Finally, Sethor, the Mithar, spoke with a snarl. "You speak of collaboration, but I see no advantage in sharing power with those who are weak." Hall stepped forward, her eyes meeting Sethor's unflinching gaze. "Power isn't just in strength, it's in knowledge, and together we can become stronger than any one of us alone." A long silence followed. The galaxy had long been ruled by those who sought dominance. But now, a new possibility had been born, one that offered a future not of war, but of collective growth. Finally, Kalan's voice broke the silence. Perhaps we have overlooked something. Their tendrils flickered with acknowledgement. Perhaps it is time to learn, as the humans have, that survival doesn't just mean overcoming. It means evolving together. The tension in the chamber shifted. Slowly, one by one, the delegates began to speak. Some grudgingly, others with newfound respect, but the consensus was clear. Humanity had changed the conversation, and for the first time in galactic history, a new era was on the horizon, one where cooperation, innovation, and shared survival might be the foundation of the future. As Hall looked around the room, she felt the weight of what they had accomplished. The battle wasn't over, but the war for the galaxy's future had shifted in humanity's favor. The path forward was uncertain, but for the first time it felt possible. This conclusion highlights the shift in the Council's mindset, with humanity's strength, its will, adaptability and knowledge, becoming the foundation for a new kind of galactic cooperation. The story ends on a note of cautious optimism, where the idea of collective survival and growth has begun to take hold, leaving the galaxy on the cusp of a transformative new chapter.